Hello and welcome back around the bonfire. It is a pleasure to have you here on the show. Saying, at least this time it wasn't a bicycle kick, right? I don't know. It's better than nothing. I'm joined full house here today. We got the whole crew with us. Tim, Alan, DJ, all joining us here. Tim, how are we feeling on this fine Thursday?
I'm tired, man. I feel like I've played 390 minutes of soccer over the past couple of weeks, even though I've just been watching it and writing and talking about it. So yeah,
Yeah, gotta love it. Gotta love it. Alan, how are we doing in your neck of the woods?
I'm I'm also tired. I felt like I slept the whole day, and yeah, no, it's when I was watching the game, I may or may not have scared my girlfriend by slamming my fist into the table when that thing happened at the end. So yeah, I apologize, Natalie.
You heard it here first, folks. Alan does have a girlfriend. He is not on the market. DJ, how is it in the Florida neck of the woods, brother?
Alan has a girlfriend?
I thought this was public. What I thought we knew this. I thought everyone knew about this. Why? Okay.
There goes half our listeners.
Now how are we supposed to sell the OnlyFans?
Okay.
Make sure to subscribe to our Patreon to see Matt.
Okay. Well, we don't actually have a Patreon, but thank you so much for being here. We're actually going to talk a little bit of news before we get into the topics at hand that everybody is wondering about. Not too much in the world of the Fire since we spoke to you last. The big one, the Chicago Fire have announced their academy coaching staff for 2025 and 2026 for the MLS next season. 5 new coaches and performance staff entering for the upcoming season. Some interesting names, some notable names. Would highly recommend checking out the site for the full breakdown there. But today, we're here to talk about 2 things and 2 things only, that being the game that just happened and the game that is about to have just happened. We'll start, of course, with last night's, the time of recording at least, with Chicago Fire drawing. Well, if it was a draw that felt like a loss in Atlanta in the Superdome, as Philip Dinkernagle starts the scoring with a second-minute Olympico goal. Not seen since the days of Shaqiri, I think we could say. Really impressive stuff.
I don't think Shaqiri actually scored one.
He did.
I think he tried it a bunch. Oh, he did the
No,
one.
he
That's right.
did. Yeah, but it wasn't like a true one. It was like it kind of got is weird. But anyway,
No,
yeah,
this
not
was
since-
untouched on his way into the net. Like this was 100%
Yes.
like the thing that happened.
a thing happened, and this was it.
Well, I mean, like it was a pure Olympico. Like there's no like getting around it on like, oh, it's a technicality or like I don't know. We couldn't tell if it was screened or not. Like it was cleanly from Zinkernagle's foot into the net.
Absolutely, and that actually gave him his 10th goal in MLS play this year. DJ, when was the last time Chicago Fire had 2 10-goal scorers? I didn't ask you this before because I wanted to see if you knew it off the top of your head.
2017, I believe.
There we go.
2019,
go.
I believe.
Was it?
Was it not
Yeah,
2019?
CJ Sapong and Nikolic, yes. I knew it
Wow.
involved Nikolic.
There it is. So for the first time in 6 years, Chicago Fire have 2 double-digit goal scorers, and we still have 12 games to play. Exciting times for folks who like seeing goals go in the back of the net. Atlanta did respond later in the second half, but Marin Haile Selassie put the Fire ahead with minutes to go on some wonderful interchange inside the box. But then right at the death, 1 minute remaining in stoppage time, the Fire concede off of a corner kick. That was honestly a really well-executed play from Atlanta, so it's hard to feel too bad about it, but doesn't that just seem to be the story of the year for Chicago Fire? Guys, quick 5 words or less, how you felt when the final whistle blew last night. Tim, I'll start with you.
I mean, I think everyone felt disappointed, right?
Was it 5 words? Right around there. Yeah, Alan, 5 words?
I mean, this was the title of Tim's article, which you can read on meninred97.com. It felt like a loss.
That's a quote.
Perfect.
Both Greg and Marin Haile Selassie, by the way, said those words exactly or closely.
Absolutely. And DJ, how are you feeling? He's a man of few words, but he captures it perfectly. Tim, I think you summed it up really well. Alan, as well, it is disappointing. It felt like a loss. I think we've seen draws this year from the Fire that have felt like wins. You think back to a game like Miami, a game like Orlando the first time around where you're playing with 10 men, you hold on, you scrap it out for the draw. This truly did feel like a very winnable game, really from 1 to 90. I mean, you start with that early goal, and it kind of brings to the first thing worth talking about here. We've talked a lot about a certain level of complacency from the Fire this year, whether that's from the coaching staff, whether it's from um, the players themselves when they're on the field. And I think in a game like this, the question becomes like, were the Fire hungry enough for that second goal? Did they want it bad enough? And I don't know how you guys felt. The broadcasters, I think, seem to agree. They didn't seem to be. Alan, it looks like you've already kind of got something to say. Hop into it, man.
I absolutely agree that it felt like the Fire did not want that second goal. It felt, in my personal opinion, after the Olympico happened, it looked like almost for the majority of the game, if not more than that, that Atlanta was the one that wanted to score, and they were the ones that wanted to really push the bar. And then Marin Haile Selassie, he came on, and he did the one thing that the Fire have been lacking for, especially in that game and in previous games, which is getting in the box and just taking a shot on target, because it feels like every time they work the ball either through the fullbacks in or to around into the box or whatever, they try to pass it up through. It always just gets ping-ponged between players' legs, and then it gets cleared out in the end by Atlanta defenders.
So I honestly don't think that that's really the origin of the problem here. I mean, like, I think that they were a little complacent. They were sitting back too far, but I think a little bit of that is, I think that Atlanta were more effective at pressing than I think they looked to me the first time I watched the game, even after the first goal came. And the Fire seemed to be completely out of ideas and how to win the game through the midfield. And if, like, there's a couple of times that, I wrote down in my notes, like, the Fire are just having a kickabout in the D-mid, or they're having a kickabout in, like, sometimes, like, not that far out of Atlanta's box. And, like, they're, just a lack of strong ideas of what to do to sort of, like, get, a numerical advantage in some part of the pitch and get the ball there, I think was pretty striking. I think some of that was personnel, but I think that some of it is just, there needs to be either new ideas or better execution, or a combination of the two.
Yeah, Tim, it's kind of interesting. Like, we've talked quite a bit, I think, about Greg Berhalter and a lot of lights, and I'd kind of love whoever wants to weigh in on this to weigh in on it. I do think there's a question to be asked. Like, the beginning of the year, we saw kind of right from jump that this team was much stronger in their tactics, right? I think the biggest complaint of the Klopas era was not enough tactics. It was just a lot of guys going out, kicking the ball around, booting it down the field, hoping for the best. And now we're sitting at this point, 20 games into the year, that gosh, it really kind of feels like they don't have it, right? I mean, they don't seem to have quite the same touch on ball. They don't seem to have quite the same, for lack of a better word, like, ability, and I can't think of the word right now. I apologize. But like, the
Creativity.
ability and
They don't seem to have
yeah, there it
creativity
is.
and motion. Yeah.
Thank you. They don't seem to have the understanding of where the ball is moving to next. There seems to be a disconnect between guys who have played a whole lot of minutes together. And it does kind of make you wonder, especially after a game like this, where the Fire were clearly the better team. I don't think I am wrong in saying the 2025 Chicago Fire are a step or two ahead of the 2025 Atlanta United squad. Like, I don't think that's crazy. I think that reflected on the play last night. Atlanta just wanted it more. They were more locked in. They cared more, and as a result, they won the game. It seemed like this team walked into Mercedes-Benz Superdome and said, "We're better than you. We can win this game," and they're not good enough to do that.
I think that may be part of it. I think that part of it, I think that I can't really say exactly what was missing other than just creativity. Maybe it was, to get back to the question of were they pushing enough for the first goal? Or the second goal rather. I think we, thinking about it, we don't really know if they were pushing for the first goal. It happened off of essentially the Fire's first sustained sequence of possession. They, Philip Zinkernagel did good work to win a corner early, took the corner, and it was in the back of the net. And so I think that, like, the question would have been, if that goal hadn't happened and it had been 0-0, would we have been seeing the same, I mean, frankly, kind of like uninspired play from the team? And I think that my gut feel like we'll never know, but my gut feeling is maybe. And when you look like they did outshoot Atlanta pretty significantly. They had more shots on target, but like a lot of the shots like were sort of like low percentage chances into screens or from like wide areas or outside the box, like that kind of thing, where it's like you're not really making the most of the skills that you've got on the pitch and the talent of the squad by taking a bunch of low percentage shots and kind of hoping that you bang one in past Brad Guzan.
Yeah, and I think maybe the important thing to note that you're saying there, Tim, about like some of those chances, it's like you put the slightest bit of air on the ball. This is probably a 4-2 win minimum. I mean, how many kick saves is 40-year-old Brad Guzan going to get before you actually just put one over his head? It is very clear.
He's like Brad Guzan is 60 years old or he's like 25, and like he flips between the two sometimes, and he's like one or the other and nothing in between.
And sometimes he flips mid-game. But that does kind of bring us to maybe the second half of this conversation, which focuses a little bit more on, yes, on personnel, but also I think on usage of personnel. I think I and most of us were pretty critical of some of the choices made during that Open Cup quarterfinal, which I have to say I was pleasantly surprised, and I guess I'm not happy about it, but I'm pleasantly surprised that seemed to be reflected by some of like the larger media of like, what are you doing? This is an Open Cup quarterfinal. But we saw Jay Davia make his first MLS start last night, and I think Tim, you and Alan both actually kind of alluded to you're kind of just playing kick around somewhere in central midfield. There was a lot of talk about Jay Davia's inability to move the ball, to progress the ball, and we saw him play almost the entire game. He was in there for a good chunk of time. I apologize, I don't have the exact number in front of me, and I should have written it down. But a guy like that who isn't necessarily going to be the most creative in midfield certainly didn't help the cause last night. And it again calls into question, what is the end goal here, right? Is it to flesh out this new 22-year-old, or is it to actually win a very, very winnable game on a Wednesday night in Atlanta?
So Jade stayed on until the 81st minute, just when he gave way for Pineda. It doesn't seem like that was really an injury thing. It could have been a planned rotation thing. It's, I think, maybe worth saying we've been critical of Jade Davila and the way that he's played. I thought this was an okay outing. I mean, he did certainly make a lot of mistakes. Every midfielder is going to make mistakes, especially early on. Mm-hmm. His mistakes didn't really cost the team directly, and the Fire were in a 1-1 draw when he left, and they ended up in a 2-2 draws. Like, I don't know, like I don't think that the performance is on him by any means. We saw, I think, a little bit more of the promise that that made him such an expensive player for the Fire to bring in, like a multi-million-dollar transfer fee for a relatively inexperienced 22-year-old. But it was inconsistent. I like seeing some of the flashes. You saw him make some really good, positional plays. You saw him, I think his positioning was decent a lot of the time that you didn't really notice it, which is maybe not a lot of something to say. And he did kind of like get in and make some really great tackles, but he was on a yellow for a lot of the game. That made me very surprised he didn't come in at half. And I don't know or go out at half. I'm not sure if anybody else had the same thought of like, we've seen this guy make some reckless tackles. He actually made a couple of reckless tackles in the second half, but ultimately wasn't called for it.
Yeah, Alan, any thoughts on Jay's performance?
It was just aggressive at some points, like to mention the yellow card. I think there was a moment where he made another tackle that was called a foul, and a lot of the commentators were they were like, oh, he's kind of lucky he kind of got away without another yellow card leading to a red. I was honestly very scared of that as well.
And it like when you watch it closely, like it wasn't a yellow sort of card kind of play, but I think that the real question is like, it's not like he has shown tremendous poise and positioning with his body where it's like, every time he goes in for a tackle, he's going to get all ball, like, it's going to be clean. And I think the question is more, is that an unnecessary risk considering the game state and considering the fact that if he were to mistime things a little bit and like, let's not forget, like sliding on turf where he the Fire practice on grass, the Fire play on grass at home. This is a different playing surface, and I think that entered into a couple of parts of the play a few times. And so if he slid a little bit differently than he thought, I mean, it could be easily something that gets him sent off and puts the team down a man at a time when they really weren't controlling the goal. I think it was actually the 69th minute from my notes. And on the commentary, they seem to think that the reason that it wasn't called as a yellow was Miguel Almiron went down sort of easy. He did, but like I just think it wasn't a yellow either way.
Kind of to break a little bit here because we've seen a little. We'll talk about this a little more in the preview, I think, too. But we've seen a little bit of a dip in form from a lot of the mainstays. I think that's part of the reason we saw JW for 80 minutes last night. And I think the obvious answer is tired legs. That's kind of what most people are going to say. You're 20 games into a season, plus your cup play, which Fire played multiple games in Open Cup, so it's not nothing. A lot of injuries, so a lot of guys have been staying on the field for full games when they wouldn't have expected to necessarily. And Alan, Tim, DJ, if you want to weigh in, like I'm kind of curious, how much of this are we talking up to tired legs, and how much of this are we chalking up to potentially just not having a full enough squad that can actually execute the plan, but also maybe a bit on a lack of dynamicism, right? A lack of dynamic coaching from Greg Berhalter, right? In terms of changing up the squad, making sure that everybody's staying fresh, but also changing up the tactics and not playing the same way week in, week out. Kind of curious on the weights you would apply to each there.
Honestly, I'd say it's pretty much even across the board, only because you figure, especially with the midfield, Pineda, Guti, and Orel have been playing almost nonstop for 4 months now, with only a few breaks in between. And of course, the front three, we know what's going on with them. We know Bamba is going to get a break soon. Kuipers will probably get a break soon.
By the way, we don't know that he's getting a break soon. I still the wording that Greg gave us was just kind of said like there's a break and like there's also this break coming up, and I think that it just is literally the break in the Fire schedule. I don't know if it's I would sort of doubt that there's going to be planned time off for him, like what we saw last year for some of the guys that came over from Europe. So that would be my guess.
Which even then, though, that's still better than nothing.
Yeah, no, I mean, right, you'll take it. I don't think we're going to see Jonathan Bamba being the Jonathan Bamba that everyone expects him to be, especially himself, until he actually gets a month and a half or 2 months between competitive matches, frankly. And that's one of the reasons that a lot of players don't look good in their first year in MLS it's a lot to adapt to, right? Like new language a lot of the time, new country, longer travel. And I think the league is more physical than a lot of players are used to, especially like DP level players. And you're tired and you just can't really make those changes and adapt until you get real time off. And I think one of the things that makes me really think that's the case is you can see the frustration from Bamba when he doesn't quite time his run right, or like a pass that he sends off doesn't quite go the right way. And I think what that is his mind being frustrated that his body is not doing the things that he expects his body to do.
I agree with DJ that it's a lot across the board of, it's MLS. It's a small squad. It's a very busy schedule considering they played several games in several weeks. And in my opinion, also having to do with tactics. It can get a little bit stale, and I have read across social media that some people are just not happy with how Greg is managing this team, and maybe not how he's managing, but specifically tactics and as well as substitutions. So
yeah, I think the substitutions are a different point that we can get into a little bit. Tactics, I do want to say the Fire did sort of switch things up. This was playing a lot more like a 4-2-3-1 than what we've seen from the Fire before. Earlier in the year, we saw, I think, a lot of mileage out of Brian Gutierrez being used as a midfielder in the flat three. This one, it really was more like a sort of like classic, 4-3-2-1 sort of like lineup. Guti would spring up at times and stuff like that, but it wasn't quite the flat three midfield that we saw in front of like three attackers. Or behind three attackers rather that we were seeing earlier in the year. And obviously formations are not tactics. I don't know if it worked better, to be honest. And I think that gets back to your original point, John, of like, is it a question of like, when you look in your pantry and you've only got so many ingredients, you can try varying up what you cook. But in the end, if it's the same ingredients, like, is it all going to end up sort of tasting the same in one way, shape, or form or another?
Yeah, and I think just for time's sake, we might wrap our review here and move on to talking about Montreal. I think the last point I'll mention, Tim, I think I've been critical at times of Greg Berhalter. I've praised him effusively at different times. The big thing I think to take away from this game, I think for a fan, right, is incredibly difficult to watch. That's an awful way to end a game. I think we all share Alan's sentiment of smacking the table as that ball hit the back of the net.
I'm scaring my girlfriend. Sorry, Natalie.
Yeah. Well, and I think that like the other thing before we move on though quickly is like I think that Alan, you were about to make this point, like some of the substitution choices, like that's been something that I think has like kind of dogged Greg as a criticism sometimes, and like the team, again, like there were guys on the yellow cards going into the locker room at halftime. No changes were made at half, and kind of the team went. Again, like was in a 1-1 draw, but like it felt like they were losing just with what had been going on in the game state and all of that. And Greg waited until the 67th minute to go to his bench at all. And like I think the question is, could those subs have come in sooner and could they have made more of a difference earlier? And like even that's past like, was it a little bit too much of like doing the like for like thing rather than bringing on a sub that would sort of change the shape a little bit and maybe provide an option to solve one of the problems the Fire had been having?
Not just is it too much of a like for like, but if you're going to do a like for like, do it early, right? I don't know that I get the idea of, hey, this isn't working. Let me make a change that's the same thing, but a different guy too late into a game to really affect it. And actually, to be fair, it did affect it. Martin scored a goal. But it just, I guess, too little, maybe not too late, unfortunately. But the main point I was going to say before we moved on was if you look at the current standing of the 2025 Chicago Fire, they have scored more goals, they have won more games, and they have one total point less than the 2024 Chicago Fire with 14 games left to play. So I understand how difficult this was to watch for a lot of people. Take some solace in the fact that if the Fire were in the West, they would be firmly in 7th place right now. So it's just something.
12 games left to play, not 14. But your point remains.
Sorry.
Yeah, they've got a third of the season left to play. I think the goals against is one of the things that you sort of look at as well. There's the problem. But it is obviously like the vibe around the team, the vibe around the locker room, right? Like I think is completely different than it was last year, where I think the disappointment that guys were feeling last night felt the same with a 1-point draw on the road as it would have after like the team's 3rd or 4th consecutive loss at home last year. And I think that difference of we dropped 2 points rather than, oh no, we're continuing this losing streak says something about the expectations the team has for itself and just how much better the team has been playing.
Hey man, I say to that, there, like the first thing you mentioned, that we still have a third of the season to play, and also a lot of the opponents that we have still to play. It's kind of I want to say, a healthy mix, or even more towards teams that are either similar in standing or less in standing, more than what it feels like the last few games have been against top teams like Cincinnati, Minnesota, San Diego, which are, all very difficult games. So,
and I had an article about this earlier in the week before the game against Atlanta, but it's mathematically an easier schedule from here on out. And I think that, that schedule though, like you have to win the games you should win. It was frustrating this was not a win. I think that this can be like this next game, I think is the game that then becomes almost like a must win.
Amen.
Yeah, and we'll see how that bodes for Chicago Fire as they do head up north of the border to face CF Montreal at Stade Saputo. Montreal actually on I guess for what their standards would be a little bit of a heater. If you're unfamiliar with the season they're having, they are leading the wooden spoon race. They have 15 points, and they are only
Wooden spoon.
ahead behind LA Galaxy because they have a negative 23 goal differential. That's, I believe, 20 goals for, 43 goals against, something to that extent. But in their last six
they had
games,
scored 4 goals in their first 10 matches in the season. So, you're right. Like, they are on kind of a heater. They've scored goals in what, like, I want to say like 6 or 7 consecutive games now. Like, my God, prime Barca right here.
Games, Tim, they've won 2/3 of their total wins for the season. They're 2-2-2 in all competitions for their last 6 games. Prince Owusu leading the way with 10 goals. Luca Petrasso with 2 assists. I just want to point out, if Jonathan Dean was on CF Montreal, he would lead in assists. I think that's insane.
Wow.
Shout out Jonathan Dean.
But still, 2-2-2, like, they are lining up the parade in Montreal right now.
They are. They are. And on top of that, they just sold Nathan Saliba to RSC Anderlecht. So they've got a payday coming in too. But another hole.
That's Montreal's entire MO. Just like that, they either get but frequently just buy other MLS pieces and they flip them to other teams to make some money. And if they can win a couple of games along the way, that's great. But I'm not really sure that that's that baked into the model.
I want you to imagine that CF Montreal is the rest of the Bundesliga and the entire world is Bayern Munich. That's what this relationship is like. I was going to get more of a laugh. Sorry, fellas. But as Montreal rolls in hot, the Fire rolled in freezing cold. They are winless in 4 in all competitions, if you include the U.S. Open Cup, and they've lost 5 of their last 7, including that. If we want to call it 6 out of 7 with the way that game ended against Atlanta. I think one of the things we've talked about is kind of the mentality, the toughness of the team lacking at certain points in this stretch. And so the key question, I think, to start with is, how do you bust a slump? Everybody's got a slump buster. Fellas, I'll toss it around the horn on what we think the best way to break that is. We'll talk a little bit about rotation as well, and who plays, who stays on the bench. But where do you see the opportunity in this game for the
winning
Fire?
Games? I think is the way you bust a slump, right? Like, winning games, you should win. The Fire had a chance to do that on Wednesday. No, but like, that's like legitimately, like, the Fire arguably, despite not, I think we talked about the problems with the performance. They played in a way that seemed like it wouldn't have been that surprising if that last corner kick had not done what it had done and the Fire had walked away with a win. And then it's a different conversation a little bit about like the lack of energy at some points and stuff, but it's a win. This is a team that is obviously, I think, significantly worse, has way fewer difference makers because they just got rid of one of their best D mids. And is like, frankly, in the position they're in for a reason. Like, it's not like Montreal has fielded some really exciting teams in recent years. This is not one of them. They did play decently. I mean, it was a loss, right? Like, so it's sort of like the 2024 Chicago Fire. Midweek against Philadelphia, they played, the Philadelphia Union pretty close. Like, it was a game that it would not have been surprising if Montreal had gotten a point, or like, a win is sort of like where the goals come from, but like, it wouldn't have been the craziest thing that I've heard if with that performance, if I'd only watched part of it, it had turned out that Montreal had won.
To jump off of or jump onto what Tim was saying, and sure, John, you can keep throwing your tomatoes. Do what the Fire have surprisingly been able to do this season, which is win on the road. I mean, I've been saying it over and over. You go back a few seasons where the Fire could maybe win 1, or they haven't won any on the road, and now all of a sudden they are the road warriors of MLS. Bring it on.
You make a valid point there, Alan. You make a valid point. I think the obvious answer that we've all kind of, the obvious answer is that the more or less obvious answer, depending on who you ask, is you shake things up. You shake the snow globe just to get a different angle, right? We do expect to maybe see some level of rotation. There will be at least guaranteed 1 slot up for grabs. Sergio Orhel actually serving a suspension for yellow card accumulation in this game, so he will not be available for selection on Saturday, meaning we may see another Jay Davia start. We could see another Romani Kwame start, which would make more sense for like perspective. Just did see him actually replace him on Saturday. Or
And I think that does kind of bring up like maybe that's the reason that Jay Davila played 81 minutes on Wednesday, right? Was the idea that you need to bring on somebody, like you need to keep somebody fresh for Saturday. When you have limited options, I think, Kellen Acosta is the other name that you haven't mentioned. He's like, we haven't seen him in a little bit. He was injured for a while. And I don't think we know between Kellen and Kwame how many minutes either of them have, again, because coming back from injury.
Yeah, I think I I don't know what we can really say about Kellen Acosta at this point that we haven't kind of already said. It's just weird. I been very critical of Jay Davia. I have a hard time believing that he is that much worse than current Kellen Acosta, if I'm being entirely honest. But we saw Romani Kwame play, the better part of 40 minutes, if we're counting stoppage time as well on Wednesday. So wouldn't be shocked if he was able to go 45-ish, if not a little bit more on Saturday, obviously just depending on his workload. We've seen Sam Williams play at a higher level than would be expected for a player of his history, for lack of a better word. So wouldn't be surprised to see either of those guys. I mean, certainly in the match day 18, but wouldn't be surprised to see either of them start, depending on how they feel about this Montreal side either, right?
Yeah, and it's a side again, like, Atlanta, we can talk about how badly they played, but I think that contrasting the two opponents who are like not that far off in the standings and below the Fire considerably on points, is a little bit useful. Like Montreal, they don't have the difference makers that Atlanta had on Wednesday, and I think that changes the complexion of the game so much. And and for Kellen, in a press conference, I after the second Nashville game, which was, I believe, the last time that we saw Kellen Acosta start, what he said was basically it's been difficult for Kellen, not starting all the games and stuff. But what he said was basically that the exact quote that stuck in my head is Kellen has, quote, done what he can, which is not exactly high praise, just given the performances that we've seen. And
that makes me a bit
I don't
sad.
think you have to read too much into done what he can to sort of see that maybe Greg feels like there's something missing from Kellen that was there when the 2022 World Cup was getting played and Kellen was getting minutes in that competition.
I mean, or the 2023 MLS Cup final, right? It wasn't that
sure, but
long
Greg
ago.
wasn't coaching the 2023 MLS Cup final.
Yeah, I just mean to say, like, it wasn't that long ago that he was considered like one of the better midfielders in MLS. Like, not a top 5 guy by any stretch, but a really valuable part of a championship team,
It wasn't that long ago when everyone was changing their profile picture to the blurry Kellen on his phone in the background during preseason, and then you guys remember all the hype.
No, we're gonna drop the. Sorry,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. By the way, this is the time to shout out. Speaking of like recent Flyer players, to shout out that Fabian Herbers is playing for CF Montreal. He has had limited minutes so far. He played 45 minutes against Philadelphia. So the Fabi Hive, you may get to see your guy on Saturday.
Look, I know this isn't hot takes, but I'm so tired of hearing about Fabian Herbers. I'm sorry. I just am. I'm tired of it. We're gonna move on.
Okay.
We'll talk a little bit about. Canceled. Please cancel me for not being in on Fabian Herbers. I appreciate who he was. That is all I'll say.
This is a Creighton fan podcast at the end of the day, and we will not tolerate that kind of speak, John.
Look, going from the guys who have not been playing to the guys who have been playing, it does seem there's been a drop in form from a lot of the mainstays. We talked a bit about some of just tired legs, but recently it's Hugo Kuipers underperforming, Andrew Gutman underperforming, Sergio Argel, Jonathan Bamba, who we've talked about at different times. It does feel like this is a game ripe for rotation. We've talked a lot about Jonathan Bamba and Marin Haile Selassie. I don't know what more Marin Haile Selassie can do to keep knocking on the door and say, I deserve to start a game, an MLS game, like a real game that matters and not a cup game.
And also Andrew at the same time, like what more, I think a little bit with that, it's also like, what more does Jonathan Bamba need to do to say like, look, I'm getting played too many minutes right now. Right. So it's, mutually kind of like.
Well, the one day he thought he was going to get off, he ended up playing almost 60 minutes in that Open Cup game. Or no, he only
Yeah.
played 30 minutes. Sorry, he came in after extra time. But still,
It's I mean, right. It's been like a lot of, but I think the other flip side of that though, that you talked about Kuipers, I thought he did some of the good things we saw him do, and this is not going to sound great, but like in 2024, which was not so much scoring goals because he didn't really get that many opportunities to do it, but he was doing some of the stuff with hold up play, some of the stuff with like pulling defenders towards him on runs and stuff and creating space for others. He wasn't getting a ton of chances that he missed in against Atlanta, and like I kind of think that that's sort of where we are. I think the flip side of like, do you rotate guys off, is against a weakened opponent that has also been playing a bunch of matches. Like their legs are going to be tired too, and their bench is frankly shorter than the Fire's. Is this an opportunity to give some of those guys confidence back? Like give Hugo Kuipers a chance at a goal or two, or potentially like see if he can match the output of Tom Barlow in a match, for example, and get a hat trick.
yeah, I like what you're saying there, Tim. Some confidence back. I do. My concern with Hugo Kuipers, I think somebody made the point to me earlier, like he scored 4 goals in his last 7 matches. And if we're being honest, like it could have been 10. Like he's had opportunities and not converted, plain and simple. Like he has been given service and not converted. And I'm exaggerating, of course. My actually bigger concern with Hugo Kuipers lately has been his body language. It's been horrible. Like Hugo Kuipers in 2024 was not one to throw his arms up and throw his head back and wave his hands at somebody who played an errant pass. He's been doing that a lot in the last month. And maybe you can say it's because he recognizes that the guys around him are better than what they're serving him, right? But that is, I mean, guys, I don't know if I'm the only one seeing it or if I'm the only one taking issue with it, but that has been something that has been off to me in the last 3 or 4 weeks from Hugo, like on field in game.
So
I
think that. Go ahead, DJ.
I think genuinely that's part of it, is because he knows these are guys that should be doing better, but I also think it's probably frustration with himself. I'm going to be honest, because I mean, Kuipers is everywhere. That's one of those things that I brought up before, is Kuipers is literally in every aspect of every play, from defense to like everywhere. And I think that's kind of part of it, is he's getting frustrated because he's now not really in the position to score the goals as much. And when he is, well, congratulations, he's running back and not doing well on it.
Yeah, and I mean, he definitely has missed some, I think, great opportunities over the past few games. I'm just saying that we didn't see that most recently. So, like, I think it's sort of important to say what has happened in the past couple games. Talking to Hugo about it a little bit, he sort of said, look, it's about the performances and expectations that this isn't an exact quote, but it's like about the performances and expectations that we've got on ourselves now. And, I can say in the locker room, like it seems like the locker room is sort of like with him. And so I think more it's just like communication rather than like actually like deep frustration, where like there have been guys where it feels like there's a real disjointed aspect of how they are versus like where their teammates think they are. And I think this is more like we have to be doing better rather than it's like it's on you guys for not providing me that level of service.
Yeah, I think in my eyes, a little bit less about, oh gosh, I think Hugo Kuipers is driving a wedge between him and the other players, as much as it is like Jonathan Baum is clearly struggling. I think just physically, like I don't think his body is in the best place right now. Brian Gutierrez is, we'll say, young and impressionable, I think, right? Just on some things we've seen from him. So I don't love that the leader of the attack is kind of having that attitude, right? I'll say it that way.
I think that it's fair to say the leader of the attack is going to the MLS All-Star game, and it's not Hugo Kuipers.
Fair. The guy who is supposed to be the leader of the attack. How about
the
that?
guy who's supposed to be finishing the goals, right? And I think that's, I mean, he is, Hugo Kuipers is not that far off of the MLS Golden Boot lead. Like it's still entirely possible that he could be in contention until the last game, and that he could possibly win it, right? Like depending on what happens around him. I think
maybe
that
if Sam
you're right though. Like
stops playing soccer.
Guys go on heaters, guys like kind of like lose some of it. Like it's, that happens. Now like Nashville are playing really well. Are they going to keep on playing the way all the season? Like that's the whole thing, right? But like Hugo Kuipers overall has had a pretty good season. Like the recent form, I think we need to not focus too much on like that part of the performance. But you're right. Like you do want to start seeing more from him. And I think a little bit of that does go onto the players around him of like, I don't have a number in front of me, but like we've talked about Bamba being tired. How many minutes has Hugo Kuiper's been on the pitch with, especially with any gas in the tank, and had, say, when Bamba goes off for Marin and gets Marin on with fresh legs and maybe some different ideas and stuff like that with how to proceed from that position. And that's the kind of stuff that can make a difference in providing service for him. And like that's the sort of thing that I would like to see a little bit more of before like trying to make it all on the striker. Because a lot of the time, even if strikers miss some golden chances, it's about getting them enough chances where they get the goals anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. Fellas, I think that is a pretty solid place to wrap. Anything else we want to chat on before we move over to the all important question that needs to be asked?
There's
All right,
apparently a
all I'll say
pre-game
is-
concert at Montreal, so I don't know if that's happening outside the game or inside the pitch or something like that. But if Alex is reporting from the match seems weird, it's just because he was influenced by too much Quebecois music.
Blech.
He had one too many Molsons. That's what happened.
I'm gonna say
Forever in
Marin is
Canada.
exactly what Fabi should have been. That's
My
like
most
I'll keep
recent-
saying it.
My the one of the girls I was working with in a recent opera was from Montreal, and she spoke a lot of French, and I was just like, I don't speak that.
Thank you for that enlightening analysis, Alan.
I just wanted to join the conversation, but no. All right, this is my official letter of resignation for the podcast. In case I
No.
don't see you, good morning, afternoon, good night.
Okay. Anyway, now on to the most
Christ.
important topic, the thing we always do, and the question that needs to be asked. In fact, it begs to be asked, and that is, Tim, who you got?
I'm going to say it's going to be a 3-0 win for the Fire. Brady's due for a clean sheet. I think that they can get it against. If they can get it against anybody, this is a team they can get it against. So let's see the team actually take care of business completely and avenge the draw that felt like a loss on Wednesday.
Slay Queen. I love it. Alan, who you got?
Sorry, the Slay Queen thing flipped me off. I said 2-1. I think we'll get back to winning ways, but with just the amount of games that we've been playing, with the roster that we have, there's probably going to be a slip up. And knowing that this is still the Chicago Fire, we're talking about something is bound to happen. So I do hope for a clean, and I hope they prove me wrong, and I hope it's more along of Tim's prediction, but I will still say 2-1, but for the Fire, for the good guys.
We need to cement something is bound to happen as a quote from you, Alan.
Something is bound
Something
to happen.
is bound to
Get
happen.
it on a t-shirt. Get it on a t-shirt. Something is bound to happen with my face plastered on it.
Speaking of something that is bound to happen, DJ, who you got?
4-1 win.
Ooh.
I'm going to say only 4-1 win just because Montreal is genuinely that bad.
Guys, what's the point of the outline if we're not going to say what we wrote down? I appreciate
I didn't write
you
anything in the
using-
outline.
There's something next to your name. All
It
right.
wasn't
Well,
by me.
anywho, yeah, I I put 4-0 Fire W. This is just kind of the ultimate get right game to me. I could see a world where Tom Barlow starts and has another random 2-goal game. I could see Leonardo Barroso busting a few out, getting into the box, putting one away. I think this is going to be a kind of start to finish Fire win. And if it's not, that's when you really start asking questions about what are the likelihoods of playoffs. That is just about as good a place as any to wrap it. Chicago Fire, again, taking on Montreal this Saturday. They'll take on New York Red Bulls the following Saturday before that 1-week break. So you will maybe not see quite as much of us as you have been lately with all these midweek games. You just whoop that, Alan. You're excited that people won't be hearing from us. That's messed up, man. That's
I'm
messed up.
excited to
They're
get
gonna
a
be sad.
break. I'm tired, okay? I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
It's too damn bad.
Okay, well, DJ cursed.
Tim
Anyway,
is done with us.
we'll be back after the Montreal game to preview the match against to review and then preview the match against New York Red Bulls. So keep your eyes there. As always, give us a follow everywhere on social media. Men in Red 97 on all the important places: Twitter, Instagram. That's it. That's the whole list. You can also stay up
Facebook.
to date at meninred97.com. DJ, we've talked about Facebook so many times. We don't really do it. You can stay up to date at meninred97.com. We are 1 week as of recording away from the transfer window opening. Find out who is Chicago Fire signing? Who are they kicking to the curb? Who is leaving the villa? Which bombshells are entering the villa? That's for our 3 female listeners. You're welcome.
That's a different club.
I think it's not
no.
females watching Love Island.
I did not watch Love Island. My wife did.
I watched like half of the first episode and I was like, this ain't for me. And then I proceeded to watch all 4 John Wick.
Okay, we're going to move on.
We get to end this
Alan loves
podcast.
action movies. Thank you so much for joining us around the bonfire. It's a pleasure to have you. That's why we do what we do. If you could tune in next time and share it with your friends, that's the best way to grow the pod, grow the community, and all that fun stuff. Remember, guys, we're only 3 years from a stadium and 1 year from MLS Cup champions. I'm the first to predict it, 2026. Thanks for joining us around the bonfire. Have a great night. Come on, you men in red.